Captain Marcus Riley stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus watching the stars stretch past in hyperspace. The deep exploration vessel had been traveling for 3 months through the outer rim sectors, mapping new systems and searching for signs of intelligent life. Riley had commanded ships for 15 years, but this mission felt different. Earth's first real push into uncharted space carried weight that pressed on his shoulders every day. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency as his crew worked at their stations. Elena Vasquez sat at the communications console running her daily scans of long-range frequencies. Most days brought nothing but cosmic background radiation and the occasional burst from a dying star. Today started no different until Elena's console began flashing with an urgent pattern. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," Elena called out, her fingers dancing across the controls. "It's definitely artificial, but the pattern is unlike anything in our databases." Riley moved to stand behind her chair, watching the data stream across her screens. The signal was weak and fragmented, coming from the direction of the Vega system, still 3 days away at maximum warp. What caught his attention was the repetitive nature of the transmission. Someone was broadcasting the same message over and over. "Can you clean it up?" Riley asked. Elena worked in silence for several minutes, running the signal through various filters and enhancement protocols. Slowly, the static began to clear and something resembling language emerged. The sounds were soft and musical, unlike any human language, but carrying an unmistakable tone of desperation. "It's definitely a communication attempt," Elena reported. "The linguistic patterns suggest intelligence and the emotional markers indicate distress. Someone is asking for help." Riley felt his pulse quicken. First contact protocols demanded caution, but the human instinct to help those in need ran deeper than regulations. He opened the channel to the ship's senior staff. "All department heads to the bridge immediately." Within minutes, his key officers had assembled. Chief Science Officer Rebecca Foster bent over Elena's console, analyzing the alien transmission with professional curiosity. Security Chief Tom Anders stood with arms crossed, already thinking about potential threats. Engineer Ray Coleman studied the technical aspects of the signal itself. "The language structure is surprisingly complex," Foster reported. "I'm detecting emotional emphasis markers and what appears to be numerical sequences. This species has developed sophisticated communication methods." "What about the content?" Riley asked. Elena had been working to decode the message using the ship's linguistic analysis computers. The process was slow, but patterns were emerging. Basic mathematical concepts helped establish meaning for simple words, and from there the computer began building a translation matrix. "Captain, you need to hear this," Elena said, her voice tight with emotion. She played the translated version through the bridge speakers. The voice that emerged was soft and melodic, but filled with exhaustion and fear. "Any who hear this message, we are the Quillari of the third world of Vega. We have fought the destroyers for 3 cycles, but our strength fails. Our children hunger while our warriors die. The dark ships come again with greater numbers. We cannot stand alone. Please, any who hear this, we are dying." Silence fell over the bridge as the implications sank in. Somewhere ahead of them, an entire species was fighting for survival against an unknown enemy. The message repeated again, the same desperate plea broadcast into empty space in the hope that someone might hear and care enough to help. "Sir," Anders spoke up, "this could be a trap. We know nothing about the situation or the parties involved." Riley nodded but felt something stir in his chest that had nothing to do with tactical considerations. The message carried something that transcended species barriers, the cry of parents watching their children suffer while death approached from the stars. It was a sound every human understood at a fundamental level. "Foster, what can you tell me about the Vega system?" The science officer consulted her database. "Vega is approximately 26 light-years from Earth. The system has 8 planets with 3 in the habitable zone. Long-range surveys indicated possible signs of civilization, but nothing confirmed. The system has been on our exploration list for eventual survey." "Elena, can you get a fix on exactly which planet the signal is coming from?" "Already working?" "On it, Captain." The signal appears to originate from the third planet, which our surveys designated as Vega Prime. It's an Earth-sized world with a stable atmosphere and abundant water. Riley studied the star charts on the main display. The Vega system lay just within range of their current position. At maximum warp, they could reach it in 72 hours. But taking a single exploration vessel into a war zone went against every regulation in the book. Sir, Coleman spoke up, I should point out that the Prometheus wasn't designed for combat. We have basic defensive systems, but if we're walking into a shooting war... I understand the risks, Riley replied. But I also understand what it means when someone sends out a distress call. He activated the ship's intercom system. All hands, this is the captain. We have received a distress signal from an alien species. Requesting assistance. The situation appears to be hostile, but our response is clear. We came out here to explore and discover new life. Sometimes that life needs our help. We change course for the Vega system immediately. Department heads, prepare your sections for possible combat operations. As the crew began preparations, Elena continued monitoring the alien transmission. Something in the background frequencies caught her attention. She isolated the secondary signals and her blood ran cold. Captain, there's something else. I'm detecting multiple high-energy signatures moving toward the Vega system. Based on the emission patterns, these are large vessels, possibly military. They're not broadcasting any identification signals. Riley studied the tactical display. The unknown ships were converging on Vega from multiple vectors, clearly coordinating their approach. Whatever was happening to the Quillari was about to get much worse. Time to intercept? The unknown vessels will reach Vega approximately 18 hours before we do, sir. Riley felt the weight of command settle heavier on his shoulders. An entire species was crying out for help while enemy forces moved to finish them off. The human response was instinctive and immediate. Someone needed help, so humans would provide it. The fact that they were walking into overwhelming odds only made the choice more urgent. Elena, prepare a response message. Use their linguistic patterns and broadcast on their frequency. What should I tell them, sir? Riley looked at the stars ahead, knowing that somewhere among them a species faced extinction while calling out to an empty universe. The human answer came from something deeper than military doctrine or diplomatic protocol. It came from the understanding that sometimes the only thing standing between civilization and darkness was someone willing to answer when others cried for help. Tell them help is coming. Tell them they are not alone. Tell them the humans have heard their call. As the Prometheus adjusted course for the Vega system, none of the crew realized they were about to become legend among the stars. The first humans to answer an alien distress call were racing toward a battle that would define humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The used Prometheus dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vega system to find a scene of devastation. Broken ships drifted in the void around Vega Prime while the planet itself showed the scars of orbital bombardment. Emergency beacons flashed weakly from damaged stations, their automated distress calls adding to the chaos of radio traffic. Captain Riley stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display update with new contacts. Most of the signatures were debris or dying ships, but several Quillari vessels still showed life signs. In the distance, a massive enemy fleet held position near the outer planets, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. Captain, Elena reported. From her station, I'm receiving multiple transmissions from Quillari vessels. They're asking who we are and why we came. Put me through to the largest surviving station. Riley ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of what appeared to be a Quillari command center. The being who faced them stood nearly 7 feet tall, but had a delicate build that made them seem fragile, despite their height. Their skin was pale blue with darker markings, and large golden eyes dominated a face that seemed almost ethereal. This was Ambassador Cathara, though Riley would not learn the name until later. Unknown vessels, the Quillari spoke in their musical language, which Elena's computers translated in real time. You have entered a war zone. We do not recognize your ship designs. State your intentions. Riley stepped forward, knowing this moment would be remembered by both species forever. I am Captain Marcus Riley of the human vessel Prometheus. We received your distress call and came to help. The Quillari's eyes widened in what appeared to be shock. You came to help? But you do not know us. We are strangers across the void. That doesn't matter, Riley replied simply. You asked for help. We're here to give it. Commander Jake Morrison stood beside the captain, studying the alien through professional eyes. The Quillari appeared to be herbivorous based on their facial structure and gentle movements. Their technology seemed advanced, but their weapons were clearly defensive in nature. These were not a warrior species. Captain, Morrison said quietly, request permission to board their station. We need to assess their capabilities and medical needs, Riley nodded. Ambassador, we would like to send a team to your station to coordinate our assistance. Will you permit this? Cathara consulted with others off-screen before responding. You may come, but we must warn you, our environment may not be suitable for your kind. We do not know your biological requirements. Dr. Rebecca Foster stepped forward. We'll take all necessary precautions. Our people are quite adaptable. Within an hour, Morrison led a boarding party to the damaged Quillari station. The airlock cycled to reveal an environment that felt comfortable to human standards, slightly cooler than Earth normal with higher humidity. What struck Morrison immediately was how everything seemed oversized yet fragile. The corridors were built for beings taller than humans, but the walls appeared thin and the fixtures delicate. The Quillari who met them moved with fluid grace, but Morrison noticed they avoided sudden movements and spoke in soft tones. These were clearly a peaceful species, evolved on a world without the harsh pressures that had shaped humanity. Ambassador Cathara greeted them personally, and Morrison was surprised by the alien's reaction to his appearance. The Quillari seemed fascinated and somewhat disturbed by human physiology. Morrison was an average-sized human at 6 feet tall, but his solid build and confident movements clearly impressed the fragile aliens. Your species, Cathara said carefully, you are quite dense. Your bone structure appears much heavier than ours. Dr. Foster began her preliminary scans comparing human and Quillari biology. What she discovered was remarkable. The Quillari had hollow bones like earthbirds, delicate organ systems, and circulatory networks that seemed almost ornamental compared to human robustness. They were built for a peaceful world where survival depended on intelligence and cooperation rather than physical endurance. Doctor, Lieutenant Tom Anders called from across the command center, you need to see this. Foster joined him at a collapsed section where several Quillari were trapped under debris. The metal beam that pinned them weighed perhaps 200 pounds, not heavy by human standards, but impossible for the Quillari to move. Foster watched Anders simply grab the beam and lift it aside with one hand, freeing the trapped aliens. The Quillari stared in amazement as Anders performed what they considered an impossible feat of strength. To humans, it was routine. The difference in their evolutionary backgrounds was becoming clear with every interaction. Ambassador, Foster said as she treated the injured Quillari, we need to understand your enemy. Who are the beings attacking your world? Cathara's expression darkened. They call themselves the Nephic Empire. They are conquerors who consume worlds and enslave populations. They have destroyed 17 systems in the past few cycles, always moving toward the galactic core. Morrison studied tactical displays showing the enemy fleet positions. Why did they target your system? We are weak, Cathara admitted with obvious shame. The Quillari evolved on a peaceful world. We know art and science and philosophy, but we are not warriors. The Nephic see us as easy prey. Dr. Foster finished treating the wounded Quillari, noting how injuries that would be minor inconveniences to humans were life-threatening to these delicate beings. A broken bone that a human might walk off required immediate surgery for a Quillari. Their entire civilization was built around avoiding physical harm because they simply could not endure it. Ambassador, Morrison said, we need to understand something. When you sent that distress call, did any other species respond? Cathara looked confused. Others, but that is impossible. You are from a Class 12 world, the humans exchanged glances. What does that mean? Foster asked. Your planet, Cathara explained. According to our records, it is classified as a death world. The gravitational force, the atmospheric pressure, the weather patterns, the predatory species, no civilized being could survive there. We assumed the classification was in error when we received your response. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. Ambassador, how many species know about our classification? All spacefaring civilizations share such data for safety purposes. No one would ever attempt to contact a Class 12 world. The beings who could evolve there would be... Cathara paused, searching for words. Monsters. The humans stood in silence as the implications sank in. They were not just the first to answer the Quillari distress call, they were probably the only ones who would. Every other species in the galaxy saw Earth as a nightmare world populated by creatures too dangerous to contact. Dr. Foster spoke first. That's why no one else came. They're afraid of us. Morrison activated his communicator. Captain, we have a problem. The other species in this galaxy consider us hostile by nature. They think we're too dangerous to approach. Riley's voice crackled back. Understood, Commander. But that doesn't change why we're here. These people need help. As if summoned by his words, alarms began blaring throughout the Quillari station. Enemy contacts were moving in system, a massive fleet of dark ships advancing toward the planet. The Nephic had arrived in overwhelming numbers, confident that they faced only the weak Quillari defenders. They had no idea that the Deathworld species had come to the rescue. Cathara looked at the humans with a mixture of hope and terror. You truly mean to fight for us, even though we are strangers? Morrison checked his weapon and prepared to return to the Prometheus. Ambassador, you called for help. Humans always answer that call, no matter who makes it or what it costs us. The first battle between humans and the Nephek Empire was about to begin. The Nephek fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their dark ships arranged in precise geometric patterns that spoke of rigid military doctrine. War leader Vexthal stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the tactical displays with satisfaction. Intelligence reported only scattered Quillari survivors and a handful of unknown vessels that posed no threat to his overwhelming numbers. Admiral Dinecross had arrived just hours before with the human battle fleet, her ships, taking defensive positions around the surviving Quillari stations. The Use Ragnar, Defiant, and Aurora joined the Prometheus in what appeared to be a hopelessly outnumbered defense. Cross stood on her flagship's bridge, analyzing enemy movement patterns with the cold precision of a predator studying prey. Captain Park, Cross spoke to the commander of the UES Defiant. What do you make of their formation? Lisa Park studied the enemy fleet through her tactical display. They're maintaining perfect spacing and heading straight for us in parade formation. Either they're supremely confident or they've never faced real opposition. Cross nodded grimly. The Nephek moved like ceremonial guards rather than combat veterans. Their ships were larger and more numerous than the human fleet, but they approached the battle as if it were a foregone conclusion. That suggested they had grown accustomed to easy victories against weaker opponents on the Quillari station. Ambassador Cathara watched the approaching enemy fleet with growing despair. The Nephek had brought 3 times as many ships as their previous attacks, clearly intending to end Quillari resistance permanently. The human fleet, brave as they seemed, could not possibly stand against such overwhelming odds. Commander Morrison, Cathara said to the human officer, your people should withdraw while they still can. The Nephek show no mercy to those who oppose them. Morrison checked his weapon and prepared to return to his ship. Ambassador, humans don't retreat when innocent people need protection. That's not who we are. The first shots came from long range as Nephek heavy cruisers opened fire with massive energy weapons. Their beams lanced through space toward the human fleet in devastating displays of raw power. To Vexthal's surprise, the human ships didn't attempt to absorb the hits with shields or armor. Instead, they simply weren't there when the beams arrived. Captain, Park twisted the Defiant through a series of evasive maneuvers that would have killed most alien crews from the gravitational forces alone. Humans, evolved under Earth's crushing gravity, barely noticed the acceleration that would pulp Quillari bones or rupture Nethak organs. The human ships danced between enemy fire like fighters rather than capital vessels. "All ships," Cross commanded, "execute Volpac Formation 7. The human fleet scattered in different directions, abandoning the traditional battle line that most species used for ship-to-ship combat. To Vexthal, it appeared that the enemy was fleeing in panic. He ordered his ships to pursue individual targets, confident that his superior numbers would overwhelm the scattered humans. This was exactly what Cross had hoped for. Commander Nathan Gray led the first boarding assault, his Marines launching from concealed positions near the outer system. While the Nethak focused on the obvious human ships, Gray's forces approached from unexpected angles in small, fast vessels designed for stealth operations. The first Nethak ship to fall was the heavy cruiser Dominion. Gray's Marines cut through the hull with precision tools and swarmed into corridors designed for larger, slower beings. The Nethak crew found themselves facing something they had never encountered: predators that moved through their ship like hunting animals. Engineer Ray Coleman kept the human ships fighting long after they should have been destroyed. When the Ragnar lost main power, Coleman rerouted systems in ways that would have been impossible for species that evolved in safer environments. Humans had learned to adapt and survive when everything went wrong, and Coleman applied those lessons. To keep damaged ships operational, the Nethak discovered that destroying a human ship was far more difficult than expected. When they managed to cripple the Aurora, her crew continued fighting from auxiliary control. When they breached the hull, humans sealed themselves in damaged sections and kept operating critical systems. The concept of giving up seemed foreign. To these Deathworld beings, Chief Warrant Officer Betty Kane faced the first Nethak boarding party that attempted to capture a human vessel. The aliens were larger than humans, with natural armor and fearsome claws, but they had evolved on worlds where combat was ritualized and brief. They expected enemies to surrender when overwhelmed or retreat when OUTMATCHED. Kane and her security team showed them how Deathworld predators fought. The battle in the Ragnar's corridors became legend among both species. The Nethak warriors found themselves facing beings that seemed impossible, creatures that kept fighting after taking wounds that should have been fatal, that moved with fluid coordination as if sharing a single mind, that pursued their enemies. With relentless determination, Kane herself killed 7 Nethak warriors in hand-to-hand combat, using techniques developed by apex predators who had dominated Earth's food chain for millennia. When the alien boarding party finally retreated, they carried stories of monsters that felt no fear and showed no mercy to those who threatened their pack. On his flagship, Vexthal watched his carefully planned battle dissolve into chaos. His ships were being picked off one by an enemy that refused to fight according to established protocols. Worse, the humans seemed to grow more dangerous as the battle progressed, as if violence energized them rather than wearing them down. "War leader," his communications officer reported, "the humans are broadcasting a message." Admiral Cross appeared on the main screen, her expression calm despite the destruction surrounding her fleet. "Nethak Commander, this is Admiral Diana Cross of the Human Defense Force. You have one opportunity to withdraw from this system and leave the Quillari in peace." Vexthal snarled at the screen. "You dare threaten the Nethak Empire with your handful of primitive ships? We outnumber you 10 to 1. Cross smiled, and there was something in that expression that made every Nethak on the bridge take an involuntary step backward. It was the smile of a predator that had been holding back, waiting for the right moment to reveal its true nature. "Numbers don't matter when you're fighting humans," Cross replied. "We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. Creatures like you were just another environmental hazard." The human admiral's words carried through the Nethak fleet, translated by their communication systems. For the first time, the aliens began to understand what they faced. These were not just another spacefaring species to be conquered and enslaved. These were the apex predators of a death world, beings so dangerous that their own planet had forged them into living weapons, Vexthal made a decision that would haunt him forever. Rather than retreat and admit defeat, he would deny the humans their victory. If he could not conquer the Quillari, he would ensure no one could have them. "Activate the planet killer," he commanded. Deep within his flagship, ancient weapons began, charging with power sufficient to crack a world's crust. The Nifak had used such devices before on worlds that refused to submit, turning planets into lifeless rocks as examples to others. Admiral Cross watched her tactical display as massive energy readings spiked from the enemy flagship. She recognized the signatures immediately. Someone was preparing to commit genocide rather than accept defeat. The battle for Quillari Prime was about to become something much more desperate. The planet killer weapon aboard Vexthal S flagship began its charging sequence, drawing power from the ship's entire energy grid. Admiral Cross watched the readings climb on her tactical display, knowing they had perhaps 6 hours before the weapon reached full capacity. After that, Quillari Prime would become a dead rock floating in space. "All ships," Cross broadcast to her fleet, "emergency evacuation protocols are now in effect. We have 6 hours to save 50 million lives." Colonel Maria Santos received the evacuation order while leading ground forces on Quillari Prime's surface.